Lights form an essential safety feature for many forms of transport, generally allowing the driver to see and the vehicle to be seen. In the case of road transport, the correct operation of a vehicle's lights is vital for road safety, and that's why lighting checks are an important part of the MOT test. And that's why I'm on my bike to meet Jake in the MOT Matters studio. Hey, hi Jake.
Hello Robert.
Hey, hi. Top of the range Audi and a Suzuki commuter bike. We're obviously covering everything in this programme. What about the lights on bikes, Jake? Are there many differences between the checks on a bike compared to the other classes?
Well, for most of the lamps it's just the same, or at least very similar, but some of the lighting checks actually don't apply to bikes.
What kind of thing?
Well, motorcycles aren't required to be fitted with side repeater indicator lamps, or hazard warning lamps, or even a rear fog light. And for the purpose of the test, the rear registration plate lamp is not a testable item either.
And I know that some motorcycle testing stations will use a headlamp aiming screen rather than a beam tester, but they're not approved for testing other classes of vehicle, are they?
No, you're quite right there. But we're not going to talk about headlamp aim in this DVD. All the lighting requirements for trikes and quads, because they've been covered in previous issues of MOT Matters, and also in the back catalogue DVD that was recently made.
Yeah, I remember making those programmes.
Good. So anyway, listen, Robert, if you'd like to park up your bike, we'll make a start.
All right, then. Well, this is a bit newer than we're used to, Jake.
It is, isn't it? But, you know, this car has some of the latest lighting technology fitted to it that the testers are likely to come across if they haven't already done so.
OK, for the purposes of the test, what lights need to be fitted?
Well, none, actually. You see, if a vehicle doesn't have front or rear position lamps fitted, or they're permanently disconnected or painted over or masked off, there's no requirement for any other lamps or reflectors to be fitted to the vehicle.
Do you really get vehicles in for tests with no lights at all?
A surprising number, actually, but the majority of these will be used for off-road jobs, such as motocross bikes.
Couldn't testing a vehicle with no lights have implications for the tester?
Possibly. So in these cases, a nominated tester would always be advised to issue a VT32 advisory notice to record the details of the situation.
But there must also be exemptions from the fitment of certain lamps depending on the vehicle's age.
There are indeed, but we'll deal with these and the other requirements as we check the operation of each of the lamps a bit later on.
So I guess we start as usual in the driving seat?
Or in the case of a motorbike, sat astride the machine. But let's take a seat and we'll go through it.
OK. So obviously, Jake, as part of the interior checks, we'll be checking for the presence, condition, security and operation of the light switches.
We will, and that'll include the hazard warning light switch and the rear fog light switch. We'll also be checking the switches for the position lamps, the headlamps, dip and main dip switch, and we check that the lamps illuminate immediately as selected on both main beam and dip beam.
Is the location of the switches part of the test?
In some cases they are, but the switch for the position lamps and the rear fog lamps must be able to be operated from the normal driving position.
We must also check the telltales for the indicators, the hazard warning lamps and the rear fog light.
That's right, and we must ensure that the hazard warning lights operate by using only one switch, and that they operate with both the ignition switched on, as it is at the moment, and with the ignition switched off.
In respect of the indicator telltale, am I right in saying that it doesn't have to be in the form of a warning light on the dash?
You're quite right. It can be an audible warning. Or if at least one indicator is visible on each side from the driving seat, as is often the case on a motorcycle, then no telltale lamp will be required.
And what about the telltale for the main headlamp beam?
Well, that's not a testable item. But if the tester notices it isn't working during the process of the test, then they should always advise the customer.
And front fog lamps, are they part of the test?
No, they're not. And before we mention it, neither are the reversing lamps. But there again, if the tester notices any non-testable item is defective during the test, then they should always advise the customer or presenter.
And that's it for the checks on the switches. And it's probably worth pointing out that everything we're doing today is a demonstration for the DVD. We're not actually carrying out a test on this vehicle.
No, you're quite right. As you say, we're using an automated test lane setup here. And during the checks on the switches, we could have been checking the operation of the lamps using these conveniently placed mirrors.
Is it only an ATL where you can use mirrors to check the lights?
No, a facility with a one-person test lane setup must have the mirrors fitted as well. And it's also worth noting that any authorised test lane can use mirrors.
So why haven't we done that?
Well, for the purposes of the DVD, we'll use an assistant to go through the lighting checks so that it's a logical sequence and easier to follow. So if we jump out now, we'll move on to the checks under section 1.1 of the inspection manuals.
OK.
OK, we've got Ian sat in the car as our assistant, and we'll ask him to switch the side lights on for us.
So obviously there needs to be 2 front and 2 rear position lamps, one either side as required. But what are the other checks we need to carry out?
Well, apart from having the correct number of lamps, we would check to make sure that the front and rear position lamps aren't obviously incorrectly positioned, that they face the front and rear as appropriate, and that they also show a steady light of the correct colour to the front and back.
Which is presumably white at the front and red at the rear?
Yes, that would normally be the case, but the front lamps can also be yellow if they're incorporated inside a yellow headlamp.
What about any additional position lamps? I've seen some blue ones on my travels, for instance.
Well, only the obligatory lamps will be testable. Any optional lamps won't be part of the inspection. And of course, this applies to daytime running lights that might be fitted to a motorcycle.
Now, the position lamps on this vehicle are LEDs. If one of the LEDs wasn't working, does that justify a failure?
No, it doesn't, because that would be unreasonable. See, the lamp would still be able to fulfill its function. So provided at least 50% of the light sources are still working, that would be deemed to be acceptable.
And do you apply the same criterion to the other lamps?
Yes, we do. The same equally applies to conventional bulbs where more than one is fitted.
Isn't there a similar 50% rule for position lamps that are partly obscured?
Yes, there is. Provided that 50% of the lit surface of the lamp is visible, then that would be acceptable. And this applies to stop lamps, rear fog lamps and rear reflectors as well. Of course, in any such circumstances, the presenter should be advised.
And we have to tap the lamps to make sure they don't flicker?
Yes, we do. At the same time, we can check that the lamps are secure. It's also important that we operate all the other lamps on the vehicle to make sure that they don't adversely affect the operation of the front and rear position lamps. And you must remember also on motorcycles, this will include operating the horn.
Of course, for a motorcycle without a battery or one that isn't sufficiently charged, it's necessary to run the engine to carry out these checks.
It is, yeah. And it's also important to make sure that the front and rear position lights come on immediately, that they're switched on. But it's worthy of note that a motorcycle fitted with a front headlight, it's not required to have a front position lamp.
What about position lamps on sidecars?
Well, these are classed as obligatory lamps. So if one was missing or didn't meet any of the other criteria, that would be reason for rejection.
And what about a motorcycle that has a front position lamp incorporated in a yellow headlamp and a sidecar? Can the position lamp on the sidecar be yellow as well?
Well, in these circumstances, although the motorcycle does have a position lamp inside a yellow headlamp, the one on the sidecar will have to show a white light.
What about lenses then? I often see lenses that are either broken or are so dirty you can barely see light through them.
Well, lenses aren't specifically mentioned in the manuals, but we have to check that all lamps are complete, in good condition and clean. Before rejecting a lamp, a tester must assess the lamp to see if it's damaged, deteriorated or dirty to such a degree that it can't be seen from a reasonable distance.
What if the lens is damaged and has been repaired, say with tape?
Well, each repair will be taken on its own merits, and you would judge for things like light output, colour, security and the durability of the repair. And of course, the same criteria would apply to all lights on the vehicle.
Seems reasonable. Now, surely we've covered everything to do with position lamps.
Not quite, because some Class 5 vehicles are required to be fitted with end outline marker lamps.
Are they those lamps you see high up on some vehicles?
They are, yes. And they'll also need to meet the same criteria as the front and rear position lamps.
So which vehicles need to have them fitted?
Well, they're required on all Class 5 vehicles that have a width of more than 2.1 metres and were first used on or after the 1st of April 1991.
And where exactly must they be?
Well, the front end outline marker lamps need to be level with the upper edge of the screen or higher. The rear end marker lamps need to be as high as practicable. But it's worthy of note that the front and rear lamps can be combined into one single unit.
Right, shall we move on to the rear fog lamp checks now?
We can, but before we do, it's worth noting that on vehicles fitted with a dim dip headlight system, it's important to have the ignition switched off when checking the front position lamps.
OK, I'd almost forgotten about that.
Right. So
what age of vehicle is required to have a rear fog lamp?
The check applies to the one required rear fog light, which needs to be either centrally mounted or to the offside of vehicles first registered on or after the 1st of April 1980.
Now, this vehicle only has one, but if there were two rear fog lamps, one either side, and the near side was defective in any way, that wouldn't be a reason for rejection?
No, it wouldn't. In that condition, the tester would pass and advise.
OK, but don't we need to have the headlamps on as well to check the rear fog lamps?
Quite probably, and in some cases you might need the front fog light switched on as well. But it's perfectly all right for the rear fog lamp to work all by itself, independently of any other lamps.
So what are the reasons for rejection?
Well, they're very similar to those that we apply to the rear position lamps, in as much that it has to be present and secure. It has to emit a steady red light, has to be complete, in good working order, so that it's visible from a reasonable distance.
And it will fail if more than 50% of the lamp's light sources aren't working.
Or indeed if 50% of the lamp is obscured. And we must remember, however, that we also have to test this lamp for flicker by tapping it.
Right, so that all that's left under section 1.1 of the registration plate lamps, they must be pretty straightforward.
Well, they're not difficult, you're quite right. But there are differences across the classes.
OK, so what are the differences?
Well, firstly, we don't check the registration lamps on motorcycles at all. And in all the other classes, we switch on the front and rear position lamps, make sure the registration lamps are fitted and working, and then also we tap them to make sure they don't flicker. But we have to remember, in a case where there's multiple registration lamps fitted, any one lamp or bulb not working will be reason for rejection. And there are some additional checks for classes 3, 4 and 7.
What are they?
Well, the lamp is secure, correctly positioned, and doesn't show a white light directly to the rear.
What do you mean by correctly positioned?
Well, so the lamp is fitted in such a way that it adequately illuminates the registration plate. Now, we have to be aware that on some vehicles, the registration plates may even be illuminated from behind. And that's perfectly acceptable, provided that the registration plate is adequately illuminated.
Well, that must be the lot for section 1.1. Shall we move to the front of the vehicle and look at the headlamp checks under section 1.2?
OK, if we walk to the front, we can go through it.
Jake, this car has got some pretty fancy-looking headlamps, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And these days, more and more vehicles have been fitted with complex headlamp systems that incorporate bend lighting systems or additional cornering lamps.
Which I suppose is intended to provide enhanced lighting when cornering.
That's right. Generally, bend lighting is incorporated within the headlight housing rather than a separate lamp unit. And this provides enhanced lighting at higher speeds than cornering lamps.
So how does bend lighting or cornering lamps affect how we carry out the test?
Well, it doesn't really, because only the obligatory headlights are testable. Now, this won't include any additional lamps fitted for enhanced lighting, nor the operation of any bend lighting systems.
Well, that makes it easier for us. But do all vehicles need to be fitted with headlamps?
Well, obviously, vehicles with no front or rear position lamps don't need them, nor do vehicles first used before the 1st of January 1931.
But if a pre-1931 vehicle is fitted with headlamps, are they testable?
Not on a motorcycle, but in all the other classes, any such headlights will have to meet certain minimum criteria.
Which are?
Well, the requirements are detailed in the information column of section 1.2, which states that where one headlight is fitted, this must dip, or where two headlights are fitted, they either both must dip, or one will dip and the other one will switch off.
Now, the vast majority of vehicles will be fitted with a pair of obligatory headlamps, whereas motorcycles must only be required to have one.
Well, that's true, but some three-wheelers may only be fitted with one headlight. And again, the information column of the inspection manual will give us the criteria. It states that Class 3 vehicles first used before the 1st of January 1972, or on or after the 1st of January 1972, with an unladen weight of 400 kilograms or less, and an overall width of 1300 millimeters or less, require only one headlamp. Section 9.1 gives us further information, and the table on page 2 tells us that motorcycle-derived tricycles only require two headlamps if they're over 1700 millimeters wide.
Quite a bit to remember there, but apart from that, everything else will be fitted with a matched pair of headlamps.
Not quite. There is one other vehicle that may not have a matched pair. Now, a bus first used before the 1st of October 1969 need only be fitted with one dip beam headlamp. And where two are fitted, they still don't need to form a matched pair.
OK, so what's the definition of a matched pair?
Well, the manuals state that in order for headlamps to form a matched pair, they will both emit light of substantially the same colour and intensity and are both the same size and shape so that they are symmetrical to one another. Obviously, on a lot of vehicles, the dip and main beam functions will be provided by a single pair of headlights.
Apart from ensuring that a matched pair of headlamps is fitted if required, I guess we need to ensure that the lamps are secure, that they don't flicker when tapped, and that they're in good working order.
Yeah, and that they're not damaged or deteriorated or dirty to such an extent that the light output is well below that required to illuminate the road ahead, or that the beam image is adversely affected.
And what about the colour of the headlamp beam? I see some that are a bit blue.
Well, the light output from a headlamp should be substantially white or yellow. Now, those that you're talking about with the blue tint are perfectly okay, provided that the light that they produce is predominantly white.
And we must have to check that the main beam lamps dip or extinguish when selected.
That's correct. But small capacity motorcycles aren't required to have a main beam headlamp. Now, the affected vehicles and the information associated with them will be listed in the information column of the Motorcycle Tester's Manual.
Talking of motorcycles, if they're fitted with twin headlamps, do they both have to work on dipped and main beams?
No, they don't. One or both can operate on either beam. And there again, there's an explanation for the requirements in the information column.
Has that concluded all of the headlamp checks then?
Not quite, there's one more thing. When testing a motorcycle, it's important that we check the headlamp is not affected by the operation of any other lamp or the horn.
OK, so now we can walk to the back of the car and look at the stop lamp requirements under section 1.3.
OK, after you.
I assume there's another date to remember in respect of the requirement to have stop lamps fitted.
Well, there's more than one date, in fact. You see, vehicles first used before 1936 aren't required to have stop lamps at all, while vehicles first used before 1971 are only required to have one stop lamp, which must be fitted either centrally to the vehicle or to the offside. However, the inspection applies to all stop lamps fitted, so if a lamp is fitted, it must be tested.
And after 1971, Jake?
After 1971, vehicles have to be fitted with at least two stop lamps, and they should be about the same height and the same distance inboard from the outside of the vehicle.
So is there any limit to the number of stop lamps a vehicle can have?
Well, as far as the test is concerned, you can have as many as you like. But if any additional stop lamp is disconnected, then that item won't be testable. Now, if there's any doubt, we would always give the benefit to the presenter, and in that case, we would pass and advise.
I've seen some American cars where the stop lamps are combined with the indicators.
That's right, but that would only be acceptable on vehicles first used before the 1st of September 1965. Now, after that date, it would be a fail, because the stop lamp would effectively be adversely affected by the operation of another lamp.
Again, I assume all the usual checks need to be carried out for colour, security, condition, not obscured, and facing to the rear. Yeah,
that's spot on. And we also need to check that when the brake is applied, that the brake lights come on, and when the brake is released, that the brake lights don't remain on.
Not forgetting to tap the lamps to check for flicker?
Now, I thought I might catch you with that one. You see, we're only required to do a flicker test on motorcycle brake lights, and not on vehicles in any of the other classes.
Any other motorcycle anomalies to look out for?
Well, you may have to have the engine running to carry out the checks, but also there are exemptions from the requirements to have a stop lamp fitted on machines where the machine cannot exceed 25 miles an hour, or where the engine capacity is less than 50 cc's on machines first used before the 1st of April 1986.
OK, but motorcycles generally have two brake controls. What are the criteria for those?
Well, machines first used before the same date.
The 1st of April 1986?
Yeah. On those machines, the stop lamps have to operate on at least one control. For vehicles registered after that date, they have to work on both controls. But there's a clause about this in the inspection manual, which reads, however, a small number of machines first used from this date were approved with a stop lamp operated by one control. A machine should only be filled if you are certain that it was originally manufactured to operate from both controls.
I suppose some trikes and quads have two brake controls. What are the criteria for those?
Well, if a trike or quad is fitted with two brake controls, then they must both operate the stop lamp regardless of age.
Now, I see there's a section in the manuals for rear reflectors, but there can't be much to check there.
No, well, there isn't much. The checks are generally very similar to those that we've applied to the lamps. including the fact that they're not required on vehicles that aren't fitted with front or rear position lamps.
So apart from those vehicles, we need to check that the correct number are securely fitted, that they're facing to the rear and they're red.
Yeah, and that they're not damaged, deteriorated so as to impair their function.
And the usual rules apply in respect of being obscured?
Correct, but remember, only the obligatory reflectors are testable. Any other additional reflectors fitted aren't part of the inspection.
So that would be 1 on a motorcycle and 2 on other vehicles?
That's right, and they have to be mounted symmetrically on a car or down the longitudinal centre line on a motorcycle.
What about a sidecar? Does that require a reflector?
It does, but it doesn't have to be mounted at the same height as the one fitted to the motorcycle.
Are we concerned with the shape of the reflector at all? I believe, for instance, that triangular ones are only supposed to be fitted to trailers.
Well, you're quite right about that, but no. The shape of the actual reflector is not part of the test.
Is it acceptable if reflector tape is used in place of a reflector?
No, it isn't, and there's a note in the manuals to cover this.
OK, so finally we move on to indicators and hazard warning lamps.
Right, so let's start with direction indicators. The checks will apply to all direction indicators fitted, whether they're required or not.
OK, but which vehicles don't require them?
Well, as usual, vehicles that don't require them are those that aren't fitted with front or rear position lamps, and there are also some dates to remember.
Which are?
Well, vehicles first used before the 1st of January 1936 aren't required to have direction indicators fitted.
What about for motorcycles?
Well, for motorcycles, they aren't required on machines that were first used before the 1st of August 1986. The inspection manual also lists some other motorcycle exemptions for machines which cannot exceed 30 miles an hour or 50 kilometers an hour, or off-road motorbicycles that are designed to carry only the rider, or off-road motorbicycles with sidecar designed to carry the rider and 1 passenger in the sidecar.
What's defined as an off-road motorbicycle?
Well, the manual states that it's a motorcycle that's been adapted or constructed primarily for off-road use by reason of its tyres, suspension, ground clearance or otherwise.
So for vehicles that do have them, what are the requirements?
Well, for flashing type indicators, the usual reasons for rejection are applied.
So an indicator missing, insecure, not in good working order, or affected by the operation of another lamp?
Yeah, you've got it. And also we need to check that they're complete and not damaged or so deteriorated so that their function is impaired. And then we come on to colour and flashing rate.
Flashing rate is 60 to 120 times a minute, and the colour must be amber, right?
Generally, yes, but on vehicles first used before the 1st of September 1965, the indicators can be incorporated in the vehicle's brake lights or front position lamps.
So it could have white indicators at the front and red at the rear, like some American vehicles?
Yeah, and the same applies to motorcycles.
What about side repeater lamps?
Well, obviously these don't apply to motorcycles, but otherwise they're required on all vehicles first used on or after the 1st of April 1986.
And have to be amber, right?
That's right. And they might even be included in the front indicator lamp if it's fitted with wraparound lenses.
And how do we identify those?
Well, generally the lenses are marked up with a capital letter E in a circle or a lowercase e in a rectangle with the number 5 above it.
Well, that's easy enough.
Well, it would be if there weren't some lenses in circulation that weren't marked up with the approved markings.
And how do we identify them as such?
Well, what we'd have to do in that situation is stand about 1 metre to one side of the rear bumper, have the indicator switched on and see if there's an amber light showing from the front indicator lens. And if that was the case, then that would be deemed as acceptable.
No such worries with the old semaphore type?
Well, if you have a vehicle where semaphore indicator types are fitted, you must check that they extend and retract smoothly and show an amber light to the front and rear.
So that's indicators covered. Now what about the hazard warning lamps?
Well, you will definitely come across some hazard warning lights that are fitted to motorcycles, but as they're not a requirement on motorcycles, they won't be part of the test.
But they're required on all other classes after a certain date?
That's right, and they're required on vehicles first used on or after the 1st of April 1986. However, you may find that they're fitted to vehicles registered before this date, and if so, they must meet the requirements for the test.
So obviously the hazard warning device must make all of the direction indicators flash, and as we've already covered, it must have a telltale and also work with the ignition both on and off.
Yeah, that's right, Robert. That just about covers it.